They bulldozed 12 graves, just flattened them like they were pulling weeds out of a backyard garden, and somehow thought nobody would notice, or worse, nobody would fight back. And yeah, maybe they were used to that kind of silence, because where I live, silence is what people buy. Gated, landscaped, HOA-approved silence. But they picked the wrong land, and they definitely picked the wrong family. My name's Daniel Mercer, and I've been taking care of my family's cemetery since I was old enough to push a lawn mower without stalling it every 5 seconds. Which, for the record, took a while. This place isn't just dirt and stone. It's 3 acres of history, 12 headstones lined up behind a black iron fence that's older than most of the houses around it. Fence went up in 1878, hand-forged, still solid, still standing. And the gate. Yeah, the gate has my great-great-grandfather's name, carved into granite, so deep you can still feel the grooves with your fingers. Now here's where things start to smell funny. Back in 2007, this developer, slick guy, polished smile, the kind of handshake that feels rehearsed, he builds a luxury HOA community all around us. I'm talking 40-plus homes, mini golf course, saltwater pool, electric car chargers lined up like some kind of showroom, and right in the middle of all that suburban perfection, there's us, a cemetery nobody could move, legally or morally, so they just built around it, like we were some inconvenient historical landmark. And for years, it worked. I'd come by every Sunday, clean up the grounds, trim the hedges, talk to the stones like they could still hear me. Yeah, laugh if you want, but when your whole family is buried in one place, you don't really feel alone out there. Then, 3 weeks ago, something changed. I pulled up like I always do, coffee in one hand, keys in the other, already planning what needed trimming, what needed repainting, and the first thing I saw was tire tracks, deep ones, cutting straight through the tulip beds I planted last spring, like someone drove heavy machinery right over them without a second thought, and I just stood there for a second, trying to make sense of it, because nobody comes onto that land without permission. Then I walked further in, and that's when my stomach dropped. 12 spots, empty. Not damaged, not cracked, not even disturbed in a messy way. Just gone, like someone had erased them, scraped the earth flat, laid fresh sod over it like nothing had ever been there. And I remember thinking, no, this isn't real. This has to be some kind of mistake. But then I saw it. The 9th hole. They had expanded their golf course, added a brand new sand bunker, pristine, perfectly shaped, the kind of thing HOA newsletters brag about. And I walked closer, slowly, like I already knew but didn't want to admit it, and I bent down, grabbed a handful of that sand. It wasn't sand. It was crushed granite, pink-veined granite. And I froze, because I knew that pattern. I'd seen it my whole life, polished, engraved, standing upright with my grandmother's name on it. And suddenly it all clicked. Those 12 missing headstones, they weren't missing. They were under my feet, ground down, pulverized, turned into decorative filler for a golf course. Yeah, let that sink in. I don't even remember walking back to the gate, but I remember what was hanging on it, some official-looking notice, stamped, signed, claiming eminent domain, stating the cemetery had been legally relocated under county approval, complete with a seal that looked just real enough to fool someone who didn't know better. Problem is, I know better. So I called the county office right there, didn't even leave the property, and I asked them straight up, when did you approve relocation for Mercer Family Cemetery? And the lady on the other end paused. You know that pause, the kind where you can hear someone frowning through the phone. And she said, "Sir, we have no record of that property being filed for relocation." No record. Which means one thing. Somebody forged documents, bulldozed graves, and thought they could bury the truth along with them. And that's the moment I stopped being shocked and started getting angry. Not loud, not explosive, the kind of quiet anger that sits in your chest and sharpens everything around you. Because see, they thought they were dealing with an old cemetery. What they didn't realize was they were dealing with the owner of the land underneath their entire neighborhood. All right, before I tell you what I did next, we need to pause for a second, because what happened here, it's not just some wild revenge story. This is where things get real interesting from a legal and psychological standpoint. According to standard procedure, cemeteries are some of the most protected types of land in the U.S. You can't just relocate graves because it's inconvenient for your landscaping plans. There's paperwork, court approval, family notification, archaeological handling. Like, layers of legal process designed specifically to prevent exactly this kind of situation. So the moment I saw that fake eminent domain notice, I already knew. This wasn't a gray area. This was straight up fraud. Now, from a legal perspective, HOAs don't usually own the land outright. And that's something a lot of homeowners don't realize when they're signing those glossy purchase agreements. Sometimes, what they're actually buying into is a long-term ground lease, meaning they own the house, but not the dirt it sits on. And if that lease has an expiration clause tied to the original landowner, well, things can get messy real fast if nobody's paying attention. And here's where it gets even deeper. This is a psychological trap a lot of HOA boards fall into, especially the ones run by people who've had just enough authority for just long enough. They start believing they are the ultimate authority, not just managers, but rulers of the space. And over time, that illusion turns into entitlement. We can approve this. We can remove that. We can change whatever we want. Until one day they cross a line that actually matters. Because power without oversight always escalates. And in this case, it escalated into bulldozing graves and forging legal documents, all to make a golf course look a little nicer. Yeah, let that sit for a second. Because what happens next only makes sense if you understand one thing. They didn't think they were doing something risky. They thought they were untouchable. So yeah, once that switch flipped in my head, everything got very quiet, very focused, like all the noise just dropped out, and it was just me, the land, and the truth sitting there waiting to be used. And the first thing I did wasn't yell, wasn't call the HOA, wasn't even step foot near their precious little clubhouse. I went home, opened a locked drawer I hadn't touched in years, and pulled out a stack of documents wrapped in old wax paper, family records, deeds, agreements, the kind of paperwork people forget exists until it ruins their life. And there it was, dated 1891, the original master deed, not just for the cemetery, but for the entire parcel, all the land those 47 luxury homes were sitting on like they owned the place, except they didn't, not really. See, back in 1952, my grandfather signed a ground lease with a development company, 99 years, renewable only with landowner approval. And that clause, yeah, that little clause, was about to become the most expensive sentence anyone in that HOA had ever ignored, because when I checked the expiration date, 14 months. 14 months until everything they thought they owned technically wasn't theirs anymore. Now here's the part where people expect some dramatic revenge montage, right? Smashing signs, yelling in meetings, maybe flipping over a golf cart or two. Nah, I don't work like that. I spent the next 48 hours doing something way more dangerous. I got organized. 3 attorneys, real ones, not billboard guys. I'm talking land use, criminal law, and contract litigation specialists. Cost me 45 grand just to get them all in the same room. And when I laid everything out, the missing graves, the fake eminent domain notice, the lab sample I took from that bunker sand, they didn't even hesitate. One of them just leaned back and said, "Daniel, this isn't just civil. This is felony territory." So we moved. Fast. We sent out a formal notice of lease termination, non-renewal, effective at expiration, no extensions, no negotiations, and at the same time, we filed a civil suit, $5.2 million in damages, emotional distress, property destruction, fraud, and then came the real hammer. We filed criminal complaints for desecration of human remains. And not just basic charges, enhanced penalties, because they didn't just disturb graves, they processed the headstones, turned them into recreational material. Yeah, that lands different in court. Day 1 after filings, that's when I finally met him. Ethan Caldwell, HOA president, real estate broker, mid-40s, perfect haircut, expensive watch, the kind of guy who smiles like every conversation is a sales pitch. He pulled up in a white electric SUV, stepped out holding a folder like he was about to educate me on my own property. "Mr. Mercer," he says, all calm, all confident. "We believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding property rights." And I just handed him a copy of the master deed. Didn't say a word. Then I handed him the lab report. Then the lease agreement. And I watched it happen. That moment when someone realizes the ground they're standing on isn't theirs, his face didn't explode, didn't panic. It just drained, like someone turned the color down slowly. He tried to recover, of course. "We'll have our legal team review this." I cut him off. "You should also review the criminal charges being filed this week." That's when the confidence cracked. By day 3, emergency HOA meeting, full board. 8 members sitting around a table that probably cost more than my truck. And for the first time in their lives, they weren't discussing landscaping budgets or parking violations. They were realizing they had built an $18 million community on land they did not own, while facing felony charges. And here's the thing about panic. It spreads fast in places built on image. Homeowners started hearing rumors, then confirmations, then legal notices, and suddenly those perfectly manicured lawns didn't feel so secure anymore. Buyers pulled out of pending sales. Lenders started asking questions. Property values dipped overnight. Day 12, the district attorney stepped in. Formal charges filed against Ethan and 3 board members who signed off on the relocation. Felony desecration, fraud, conspiracy. The kind of charges that don't just cost money, they cost years. And the trial? Yeah, it didn't drag on like you'd think, because the evidence was clean, direct, undeniable. Lab analysis confirmed the granite composition matched the original headstones. Historical photos showed the exact markers that had been removed. And that fake county seal? Turns out it was printed using a template pulled from a public website. Real professional operation. 42 days later, verdict. Guilty. Ethan got 3 years, state prison. No fancy deal, no quiet exit. 2 board members got 18 months. The last one, older guy, claimed he didn't fully understand what was happening. He got probation. And just like that, the illusion shattered. Because here's what nobody tells you about communities like that. They don't collapse all at once. They unravel, slowly, painfully. Listings flooded the market. But buyers weren't stupid. Who wants to buy a house sitting on land with a ticking lease clock and a legal history that reads like a crime documentary? By the time spring rolled around, half the neighborhood was trying to get out, and the other half was realizing they couldn't. Then came the expiration. 14 months, just like the document said. No renewal, no extension, just signatures and silence. 47 families had to relocate. And yeah, I know how that sounds, harsh, unfair even. But here's the part people miss. They weren't the ones who made the decisions. They were just the ones who trusted the wrong people. And unfortunately, trust doesn't rewrite contracts. So once the land reverted fully back, I did what my family had always done. I took care of it, cleared the golf course, removed every last trace of that bunker. And in its place, I built something that actually belonged there, expanded the cemetery, added new sections, planted 200 oak trees that'll outlive every structure that used to stand there. 400 plots, all registered, protected, permanent. And right where that 9th hole used to be, I built a reflection pool. Still water, white marble, and engraved in the center, my grandmother's name. Because they tried to erase her. And instead, they made her impossible to forget. So, yeah, that's how a luxury HOA golf community turned into a cemetery expansion. And before you jump straight to good, they deserved it, or man, that's brutal. Let's slow down for a second, because this story isn't as simple as hero versus villain. Not really. It's about power, assumptions, and what happens when people stop checking the ground beneath their own feet, literally and legally. The lesson here is, ownership isn't always what it looks like on paper, especially in communities wrapped in branding and convenience. People see clean streets, matching mailboxes, a clubhouse with soft lighting and think, this is stability. But stability built on a lease, or worse, on misunderstood terms, is just borrowed time with better landscaping. And most homeowners never question that. Because why would they? Everything looks official, everything feels permanent, until it isn't. And from a legal perspective, what happened here is rare, but not impossible. Ground leases, expiration clauses, developer handoffs. These are all things buried deep in contracts most people skim through in an afternoon, trusting that someone else has done the due diligence for them. But contracts don't care about trust. They care about what's written, what's signed, and what's enforceable when things go sideways. Now let's talk about the HOA itself, because this is where things get uncomfortable. This is a psychological trap, the kind that creeps in slowly. People get elected or appointed to these boards. They start off managing small things, paint colors, lawn heights, parking rules, and over time, that authority expands, not officially, but mentally. They start to feel like they are the system, like their decisions define the boundaries of what's allowed. And when no one pushes back for long enough, that confidence turns into entitlement. And entitlement makes people cut corners. It makes them believe rules are flexible, that consequences are optional, that if something looks official enough, it becomes official, and that's exactly how you end up with forged documents hanging on a gate, convincing enough to fool a casual glance, but not enough to survive real scrutiny. But here's the part that sticks with me the most. The homeowners. Because they weren't sitting in those meetings making those calls, they weren't the ones signing off on bulldozers rolling over graves. They were just living their lives, trusting a system that was supposed to protect their investment, their homes, their sense of security. And when it all fell apart, they paid the price for decisions they didn't even know were being made. And that's uncomfortable, right? Because it forces a question nobody really wants to ask. How much responsibility do you carry for something you didn't directly do, but benefited from? I don't have a clean answer for that. I still don't. What I do know is this. Silence has a cost. Not asking questions has a cost. Assuming everything is fine because everything looks fine, that has a cost too. Sometimes a financial one. Sometimes something deeper. And yeah, I could have renewed the lease. I could have negotiated, found a middle ground, let them stay. But at the end of the day, the land had already been disrespected in a way that doesn't really come back from. And some decisions aren't about profit, they're about boundaries, about saying, this is where it stops. So now, where there used to be a golf course, there's a place people come to remember, to sit, to think, to reconnect with something quieter than all that curated perfection. And every once in a while, someone visiting will ask me, what used to be here? And I just tell them, something that didn't understand what it was built on. So I'm curious, honestly, what would you have done? Would you have renewed the lease, given those families another chance? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Because situations like this, they don't come with easy answers. But they do reveal something about who we are when we're the ones holding the leverage.